This is my August podcast. Doing it in September. Guess I'm always behind. Keep trying to catch up, but Anyway, today for this month, I'd like to talk about something that happened around somewhere between 1770 and 1780. Mount St. Helens erupted. The Indians on the Columbia Plateau started a dance, and anthropologists call it the prophet dance. And so I want to talk about the prophet dance and some of the prophecies that came out of that dance on the Columbian Plateau, primarily Indians from Flathead, Spokane, Nez Perce, and Yakima, and all of the tribes up there on the Pacific Northwest. So, without further ado, here we go. Thanks. Well, hello. This is the story of the prophet dance of the Columbia Plateau. And the prophet dance started in about 1770 or sometime in the 1700s. About the time of the American Revolution. 1776 is the Declaration of Independence. So about the same time, Mount St. Helens erupted. And it deposited 3-4 inches of ash across the Columbia Plateau. And not only had the volcano disrupted the ecology of the Columbia Plateau, by the late 1700s, disease had made it up. Disease and horses. Horses in the 1700s. And then the disease in smallpox and measles and those kinds of European diseases, even though no white man had been up there, and yet had traveled up from the south. And the Indians danced. They danced to ask Chief Mystery why he sent the dry snow and what was going on. So they danced in a circle to Chief, to the Great Mystery, trying to figure out what was going on. And they danced until one of them fell down and died. Well, fell down in exhaustion. And then when they come back to life, the prophets would tell stories. And this was called the Tulim dance. Anthropologists call it the prophet dance. And And by the time Chief Lawyer in the 1830s grew up, the dance had become Christianized, even though white people had just shown up, well, prior to Lewis and Clark. So in the tradition of Plateau Indian myth stories, the dreamers proclaim the coming of a new great change. They said chief or mystery had created everything with Coyote's assistance. And so the dance was particularly tied, at least in the prophecies, to Coyote. And this is a story that Al Pinkham told. And it's how Mystery, the chief, and Coyote created all the animals. And the story's pretty long. It went down all the way through, deer and bear and all of that. And all of them, and the insects and the birds, and they all got qualified. But the last animal to be qualified was Coyote. And he came out, but he couldn't get qualified. He tried to do something, but he couldn't do it. So when you hear Coyote today, he goes, yip, yip, yip. He couldn't even talk. So when Coyote talks, it sounds like two coyotes or three coyotes talking at the same time. So anyway, he couldn't get qualified. And the creator said that he would give pity on him. And he said, because you can't get qualified, I'll give you special powers. When these human beings come, you'll have all the faults and traits of the new humans, what they will have. And that you'll be able to do, but I'll give you some special powers beyond that. You'll be able to transform and change yourself. And you'll be able to teach these new humans many things. Creator said, I'll make you qualified, but you'll have to be gray. You won't have any other colors. And that's the way Coyote was created. And that's how Coyote became qualified to help the new human beings. And so Coyote was central in the prophet dance, sorta, in the prophecies. And so I wish I could pronounce this book. I don't know. The Spokane prophet. He fell down, and when he rose up again, he said, soon there will come from the rising sun a different kind of man from any that you have ever seen. And they will bring with them a book that will teach you everything. But after that, your world will fall to pieces. And then in another prophet dance story, a prophet came back and said, I'll send messages to the earth by souls of the people that reach me, by whose time to die has not yet come. So they'll rise from the dead. And they will carry messages to you from time to time when their souls return to their bodies, when they revive, and tell you their experiences. So Coyote and myself will not be seen again until the earth woman is very old. Then we shall return to the earth, for it will require a new change by that time. And Coyote will precede me by some little time. And when you see him, you'll know that the time is at hand. When I return, all the spirits of the dead will accompany me. And after that, there will be no more spirit land. All the people will live together. Then will the earth woman revert to her natural shape and live as a mother among her children. Then all things will be made right, and there will be much happiness. And so these prophecies became very much a part of Plateau people's culture. Started out in the prophet dance, when Lewis and Clark came through the Bitterroot Mountains in 1805 onto the Weihai Prairie, the Indians thought, well, these are definitely the men that of the prophecy. So the prophecies were central to the culture. I think personally, there's only rhetorical evidence, but that the prophet dance evolved eventually years later into the ghost dance that is so famous among the Sioux. It traveled down through Nevada and then up into the plains. It's a strange dance, but the prophecies pretty specific. Men like you have never seen will come from the rising sun and bring with them a book. And then your world will fall to pieces. But don't be dismayed. In the last days, I'm going to return, and Coyote's going to come just a little bit before me. And I'll make all things right. So this is an apocalyptic kind of prophecy, similar to the book of Revelation. And so when Lewis and Clark showed up and came out of the Bitterroot Mountains, starving, they'd gotten lost, and Clark had come out of the mountains first, and then Lewis came, a little while later. Anyway, Clark ran into three Indian boys, about 9 years old. And one of them was the son of Twisted Hair. Twisted Hair was the chief that the boys brought Lewis and Clark to. And the little boy would grow up to be known as Chief Lawyer. But they brought him to the Nez Perce camp, and this is the meeting between the Nez Perce and Lewis and Clark. And the Indians held council. They said, these are the men of the prophecy. We've never seen anything like these. Their heads are upside down, and they got eyes like fish. They had beards, heads run upside down. They got eyes like fish. They got blue eyes. And so part of the council said, we should kill him because it says that book, and Lewis had the book that he was always writing in, drawing pictures and stuff, keeping his journal, and numerous members of the expedition had journals. And the book would, and the new kind of people would educate us, but our world would fall to pieces. He said, I think we should kill him. Well, and Lewis and Clark, the whole expedition got really, really sick. They'd been eating nothing but meat, and they were starving when they got down onto the Weihai Prairie. That kind of diet just doesn't lend itself. Anyway, the Nez Perce fed them camas root. And camas is a plant, a flower that grows on the prairie, and they dig it up, the roots, and grind the roots up into a paste and make a kind of porridge. It was starchy and kind of gingery and sweet. Anyway, the expedition killed a couple of horses for him. Or the Indians killed a couple of horses for the Lewis and Clark expedition to feed them, and fed them this camas porridge. They got thrown up on each other sick. Clark wrote that Lewis couldn't even sit on his horse anymore when they rode to down to the Kamiai camp. And the Indian said, well, while they're incapacitated, we ought to kill them. But others in the camp, the older, said, no, we need to take good care of them because we need to learn from the book. So they couldn't decide. Till finally a woman spoke up. We ate this, and she said, we need to be good to them. They're like the people that she'd been captured by the Shoshone and taken away from the Columbia Plateau and sold to a French fur trader who took her up to Hudson's Bay, the Red River school, and outfitted her and helped her to get back to her own country, the Nez Perce. And she said, these are the kind of people that helped me. We need to be good to them. So anyway, her testimony settled the issue, and the Nez Perce were always friends with the white people. And they never actually killed a white person until the Nez Perce War of 1877. And so they helped Lewis and Clark. And then still hadn't become Christianized, the dance, but still just the prophet dance. But in about 1820, so about 20 or 15, 10, 15 years later, an Iroquois band showed up that was led by a chief who was a Catholic chief, old Ignace. And he taught them a little bit about, during the dance, about the Bible. And so then when Hudson's Bay Company, Simpson was in charge of the Hudson's Bay Company then, a guy named Simpson. And he sent Alexander Ross up to the Flathead Indians and the Spokane Indians up on the kind of north of the Nez Perce. And he said, and he told Ross, I wish that 2 Indian boys of about 8 years old of the Spokane and Nez Perce Indians would that you could take them and take them away from the tribe and put them in the school, in the Red River School. And he authorized Ross to pay them, up to £4 for the boys. When Ross gave this message, the Indians asked if they were looked upon as dogs willing to give up their children to go where they knew not, the place they didn't know. But Ross told them they were going to a minister of religion to learn about how to serve God and learn about the book. The chiefs responded that they could have hundreds of kids for that. And so Spokane, Gary, and Kootenai Pele were sent by the Spokane Indians up to the Red River School to be educated. About they're about 8 years old, 7 or 8 years old. And so a decade later, they come back, at least Spokane Gary came back, and he was teaching out of the King James Bible to the tribe of Spokane. The Spokane Indians spoke Salish, and Lawyer is now, he's the boy is now of age. He's been 9, so he's probably 20, right? Or something around there. He was listening. He spoke both Salish and Sahaptin, the Nez Perce language, because his mother was from that area, and he sat and he listened to Spokane Gary preach out of the King James Bible. So in 1831, Lawyer got 4 Indians, some Flathead and Nez Perce, and sent them to St. Louis to ask William Clark, who is now Indian agent, years later after the expedition in St. Louis, to ask Clark to please send them missionaries and Bibles so that they could learn from the book. So rabbit skin leggings and no horns on his head kind of survived to get there, and to ask Clark, and a journalist from a Methodist newspaper heard about the story. He said he was there to listen to them. I can't verify that, but anyway, he went back east and published the story in the Methodist paper, and they decided to send missionaries up. And so the first 2 missionaries that came, the other Indians died of disease and stuff before they got back, but I think it was rabbit skin leggings that made it back to report in 1832. But in the rendezvous, the fur trappers rendezvous that year, the Nez Perce showed up, and so did 2 missionaries, Samuel Parker and I should have notes, and Lee. And Lee didn't stay with the Indians. He went over to Oregon, to the Walla Walla area, and set up a mission, or not really a mission, an orchard, a farm community, mostly white people. But the missionary, Sam Parker, he's an old man. He went with the Nez Perce up into their country, preaching, and he was going to go back to Rendezvous the next year for more missionaries that would come and he's going to scout out the land and tell them where would be a good place for a mission. And the Nez Perce really took care of him, but he got sick. He's an old man, and so they they took him down the Columbia to the ocean, put him on a boat there, and he sailed off to Hawaii. So the next year, when the missionaries came, they no Parker, no Lee, they didn't know, but the Nez Perce met them again. And continued with the teaching. I think this is a drawing of Parker, or one of them teaching the Nez Perce about the book. And so the missionaries that came were Narcissa Whitman and Marcus Whitman, and Henry and Eliza Spalding. And Whitman, he didn't really get along so very well with, I mean, one of the testimonies about him said, how could a man like that have anything to do with an Indian? He wouldn't sit around and parley. He's always busy, always doing something. You know, what would he have to do with the Indian? And Narcissa, she didn't really like the Indians coming, but they started a mission, and on the trail back to among the Cayuse in the southern part of Idaho. And it really became a way station for people that were coming. Spaldings were better at missionary. They went with the Nez Perce up to near Lewiston, where Lewiston is now, the confluence of the Snake and Clearwater rivers, and set up a mission. But what's really unique is that Narcissa and Eliza were the first white women to cross the Rocky Mountains. And once that got back east, there just became a flood of settlers. And it's the birth of the Oregon Trail. And Whitman's mission became a way station. Eventually, the Cayuse would massacre the mission and kill Whitman, Narcissa, and Walt. I don't know. Some people claim they thought measles had come with them, but you know they just weren't good. But Spalding and the Spaldings with the Nez Perce set up a mission that actually worked. It's an early picture of the Spalding mission, and they went about teaching the Indians about the Bible. The first Indian to be baptized by the Spaldings was Old Joseph, or the father of Chief Joseph, who was the camp chief during the 1877 war, when O.O. Howard chased the Nez Perce through Yellowstone up into Montana, finally. managed to put what were then the Wild Bunch. The tribe had been split entirely between the Christian Indians and the Wild Indians. And Chief Joseph from his was in Oregon. Uh, he came to them and became part of the first baptized Christian by the Spaldings. Along with him, um, um, James, old James, was baptized and stuff, and they began teaching. Lawyer was among these, Chief Lawyer, because he's the one who sent the Indians to Clark to ask for missionaries and books. He didn't get baptized right away, but he went with another missionary, I think Asa Smith, up further upriver to be taught, and really, Lawyer was, because his dad, Twisted Hair, had helped Lewis and Clark get down the Snake and to the Columbia and down to the Pacific Ocean. He was always a friend. And though this tribe was kind of split now between Christianized Indians and the wild Indians, just north of Lawyer's camp was Looking Glass's village, and Looking Glass was the war chief of the 1877 war between the Nez Perce and the United States military. General Old Howard, the one-armed general. That's another story for another time. But in 1855, Nez Perce made a treaty, and their reservation was huge. It was part of Washington, part of Oregon, most of Idaho. But then in 1863, they came back, the U.S. government, and this is a story for another time. And Lawyer negotiated, and the reservation was small then, just that kind of triangular piece up in north central Idaho. And essentially, he and among others gave away, the Christian Indians gave away old Joseph's land over in Oregon. And old Joseph, during that 1863 treaty negotiation, went in, tore up his Gospel of Matthew that had been translated into Nez Perce by the Spaldings, threw it on the ground, said, I have no more to do, and told his son, Chief Joseph, who'd been baptized as Ephraim, even though he wasn't too fond. He became part of the Wild Bunch because his dad told him, don't sell your land to the white people. So the Nez Perce today don't even recognize the 1863 treaty, other than legally have to. They in their logo they say 1855 treaty, which was a whole lot beneficial for them. This is Lawyer's Canyon, just outside of Kami, Idaho. And this is where Lewis and Clark kept their horses. In 1805, they left with Twisted Hair to the Pacific Ocean, and they kept their horses here in Lawyer's Canyon with Chief Lawyer and Broken Arms Lodge. But anyway, they kept the horses there. And so then in 1806, they came back to retrieve their horses to go on the trip back. And they spent about a month waiting for the snow to come out of the bitter roots and that whole story. But when you think about the prophecy, men like you have never seen will come from the rising sun and bring with them books that will teach you everything. But then your world will fall to pieces. Well, that's what happened. Treaty negotiations didn't go well. Nez Perce world split to Christian Indians, wild Indians. In 1993, I was in a cafe in Cottonwood, Idaho, close to the Nez Perce camp. That for part of the year it was a Presbyterian Bible camp, and then later in the year and the 4th of July became the celebration of the wild traditional Indians. Right. And so I heard a couple of ranchers talking about those wild bunch. Anyway, the tribe was still split to this day. Better now than it was in 93, but still Christian Indians as opposed to the traditional. But this is the name of the casino at the mouth of Warrior Creek, where it comes into Kamiah, where it comes into the Clearwater River, where the Lewis and Clark expedition spent a month waiting for the snow to come out. And the casino there is called Itsi Coyote. It's Nez Perce for coyote. Prophecy that in the last days, coyote will return. Apparently, it started to come to pass a little while before Mystery Chief does. Nez Perce have a bigger casino over at Lewiston by the right across the highway from the Spalding mission. Quiet, Lola. I'm almost done. But every time I see white-haired ladies putting quarters into the Native American slot machines, I think, coyote's back. It's a yee casino. Coyote. So maybe those prophet dance people, Indians, natives on the Columbian Plateau, weren't too far off in predicting their history. I don't know. But I have a few words after this presentation to talk about it. Yeah. Thank you. Well, prophet dance is only part of this story. The beginning. I have a whole lot more, or a whole lot of other stories that go along with it. Much more to be said about the Lewis and Clark expedition. There's more to be said about the Spalding mission, about the Cayuse War, about Lawyer Canyon. But I thought I'd introduce first the prophet dance. I'm a great believer in the power of words and symbols, prophecies. certainly the prophet dance prophecies have come to pass and are continuing to come to pass. I mean, I'm a apocalyptic Christian, and so I find apocalyptic stories to be fun. This one's real life, or prophecy that has come to pass, is coming to pass. We create ourselves and our reality with words. What we have faith in is what we talk about. I believe we create. Now, I don't know that Coyote's back, the spirit of Coyote. Native Americans, Coyote stories are numerous. And I'd love to do a podcast on telling some of them. As a Northern European white man, I hope I don't piss off too many, especially Nez people who I dearly love. But these stories need to be told. Myths are important. They're not fables. Joseph Campbell said, a myth is a vehicle that transports truth across time and culture, protecting the truth embedded in the story from time and culture. And so, from Greek mythology to Bible stories to and Indian, Eskimo, whatever, Gilgamesh. These stories are important. But here's an example of a prophecy that came to pass and is coming to pass. Hopefully, maybe. I'll see you next time.